Hi, everyone, and welcome to Moonlit Scary Stories. We are your hosts, Cameron and Skylar, and today we are talking about The Babysitter.
In this podcast, we need to warn you of the possibility of language that may not be appropriate for all ages, and some may be offensive. The content we go over in this podcast is recommended for mature audiences, and a trigger warning due to murder, stalking, child murder, and rape.
Okay, guys. So imagine being a preteen or teenager babysitting alone in a big house. Sounds like a pretty good gig, right?
Oh,
I
yeah.
never, I never babysat outside of my brother, and he was only like 2 or 3, and I was like 15 to 16, so I didn't really count that as babysitting.
Yeah, but I think I babysitted like two times. Some church family that I went with, and it was even weird just being in somebody else's house in the morning or like during the evening when everybody's like getting home and it's dark. It's kind of freaky because you don't know where you're at. Like you don't know your surroundings too well. You're not accustomed to them. So yeah, no, I've been there.
I was babysat by some cousins that were like 2 to 3 years older than me, and they seem to have had it made. I mean, they really just watched TV all day, free access to all the food in the kitchen. It sounds like a good setup to me, but I can see where it can be kind of scary. But today I have an urban legend and the backstory that sparked that legend for you guys. So there are a few versions of this story, which I'll get to, but the main premise is that a teenage girl is babysitting for a family and the children are asleep. She begins to get strange phone calls where the caller won't identify himself, but she just assumes someone is pranking her and ignores it. It starts out as silence and then progresses to the point where the babysitter begins to believe whoever is calling her is also watching her. Um, And at one point, the caller even goes as far as to ask how the children are that she's
Mm.
babysitting. So, um, one of the versions of the story that seems like the scariest to me is when the girl, one version I saw was where a girl was working at a house and the family had like a clown statue in their home, and she
Oh.
would like walk by it and see it and everything and just walk through the house and pass it. And then she just thought it was part of the decorations of the home. And then it turned out the family didn't even own a clown statue. So
Mm.
it was like the person was hiding in plain sight and watching her and could have grabbed her at any moment. And that's just so creepy to me.
Mm-mm. Mm-mm. I hate clowns anyway, so just knowing that I wouldn't set foot in the house if I even saw a clown. I would turn. That's one reason. Turn the other way. Mm-mm.
Immediately, but I don't know. It might have been further in the house and she just didn't see it to begin with.
I don't
um
care if I even see a nose or a shoe. Nah, nah, nah. I ain't going in.
so, so these calls are happening and they're scaring her, and during this she finally decides to call the police, because at first she just thought everything there was a prank, that someone was pranking her, but then realized that it was escalating, so she decided to call the police. Um, and guess what? They traced the call and it came back to the house she's in.
Hmm.
So, now this part is where there's some other versions as well. Some versions say that the kids are already dead when she figures out that the call is actually coming outside from inside the house. The stalker kills there's and then the stalker kills the babysitter in this one as well. Some versions only say that the babysitter gets away and the man is arrested. Another version get that everyone gets away and the man is arrested. And finally, the last version I found was that it was just one of the kids that was she was babysitting after all that was pranking her. So there's many versions to this story. Um, this, of course, has resulted into movies similar to where a babysitter is stalked, sometimes
Mhm.
killed, like Halloween in 1978 by John Carpenter and Deborah Hill. And then a retell of this story in When a Stranger Calls in 1979 by Fred Walton and Steve Feek.
Mhm.
Newer version in 2006 by Simon West and Jake Wade Wall. I don't know if you've seen any of those movies, but
Oh
they are
yeah, all of
creepy,
them are.
especially
Yeah, yeah,
the
all.
old When a Stranger Calls. That one really creeps me out. Just the guy's voice creeps me out.
Mhm.
Uh,
I was gonna say that one was a good movie.
Yeah. The
Mm.
newer version's pretty good too. I thought that one was good because the guy's voice is really creepy in that too.
I
And then
think
in Halloween, he just kind of stalks them. He kills, like, he stalks the babysitters and then he kills one of them and tries to kill the other one, but we know how that story ends. But
mm, mhm.
so do you buy any of these stories? Do you actually think this might have happened, or do you think there's another story out there?
I don't know, cause I don't know. Obviously, she wasn't lying, cause I mean, I don't know. Being a baby, yeah, I don't know. I really don't know. I
So
know, I know if I was a babysitter and was getting calls like that, I would just ignore it. But yeah,
yeah, I would probably think it's a prank too, because I mean, they're kids, and you think that your friends are
exactly.
calling and picking on you and stuff like that. Well, I think the scariest version is the clown one for sure. Like he was just
Mm,
there the entire time. But none of these stories are extremely accurate to the actual case that sparked the babysitter killer stories. And so this happened in 1950, Columbia, Missouri. Janet Christman, who was 13 years old, was babysitting at the Romax home. On arrival, the Romax actually told Janet that their 3-year-old son was already asleep. So you would think it was going to be an easy night already, but
yeah.
Janet's night was about to end in terror. Little is
Mm,
known about what happened at the Romax house that evening. They do know Janet had attempted to call the police, but they could not understand her, and the call did not last long enough to trace it. The rest of the details were found out when they found poor Janet Christman's body, which was found by the Romax when they returned back home late that evening. Janet was found on the living room floor near the phone, which was off the hook. Miss Romack had tried to call earlier that evening but couldn't get through, and this was clearly the reason why it was left off the hook after she had tried to call the police. Um, if I was Miss Romack, though, I would have probably kept trying, but I guess maybe she thought, well, she's probably on the phone or something, and that's why she couldn't get through.
yeah, because like back then they didn't. I mean, call waiting, I guess, just had been introduced. I feel like,
Yeah, I'm not
and
sure
they're
when it was, but yeah,
out.
I don't think.
And I think like maybe the wealthy had those big box cell phones, so they. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, I think I don't know when all that stuff was actually created, but she just got like a I guess a busy tone when she tried calling. Um, but anyways, it was later reported that Janet had been raped and strangled to death with an iron cord. The
Oh God.
Roman's 3-year-old had slept through the entire violent act, thank goodness. So he
Yeah.
remained unharmed. I couldn't imagine like how, I mean, it's already bad enough to come home and find your 13-year-old babysitter murdered and raped in your home, but luckily the son didn't get up and, wasn't harmed. I couldn't imagine coming home to their
Yeah.
own
No, I
child
couldn't.
killed too. That would just
Mm-mm.
been terrible. I mean, even more terrible than it already is, obviously. Um, well, many men were questioned by the police, but only one really stood out, and that was Robert Mueller. Um, he was actually friends with the Romax. Um, and Robert had made some inappropriate comments about Janet Christman's body, and that was actually reported by Mr. Romack. So he actually told the police this. And then Mr. Romack also reported that Robert Mueller had told him, quote, I might have done it and then forgot about it, end quote. Um,
Mm.
so that's kind of odd. Like how does unless he was like belligerent drunk or something like that. But and another thing that kind of makes it seem like it might have been him is like he'd been over at the Romack's house. He was friends with Mr. Romack, and so the crime scene was said to have looked like someone knew the layout of the home, um, which would be consistent to him being possibly the murderer and the rapist because he had been over there
Mm-hmm.
plenty of times, and so it could have definitely been him. But some more interesting facts was that Robert was also known to carry a mechanical pencil that actually matched the puncture wounds that they found on Janet's body.
Mm.
So, case closed, right? You'd think so?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it seems like it, but it wasn't. So, wrong. There were mishaps and issues with police not cooperating. The city police were involved, but the crime was committed in the county, and apparently there was some kind of bad blood. I don't really know the backstory to that. But it resulted in them not cooperating with one another, and the grand jurors said as much as that, and therefore Robert Mueller was not indicted. So Janet Christman's murder is still unsolved today, even though it seems like they had enough evidence to put him away.
Mm.
It was
Yeah.
police being uncooperative with one another that made this case go unsolved.
That's so sad.
I know. Uh, it's like the family didn't. I mean, I hate when things like that happen because the family they don't get peace with it.
Mm-mm, you don't at all.
But the story isn't over. So in 1946, just 4 years earlier, Mary Lou Jenkins, who was 20 years old and lived just 2 blocks down from the Romax home, was home alone one night while her father was out of town and her mother was at work. It is said that at one point they believed that she had locked the door and everything, but in the middle of the night, the neighbors actually heard screaming,
Mm.
but nothing was done about it. And I don't really know what happened there. I'm not sure if they thought it was like kids playing or what. But Dorothy, her mother, found Mary Lou on the living room floor where she was raped, beaten, and murdered. But get this, she had an electrical cord wrapped around her neck. So
Mm.
some similarities are there with the two
Mm-hmm.
rapes and murders. Living room floor, the electrical cord, they'd both been raped.
Yeah.
Um, but Floyd Cochran, an African American male, was indicted for the murder and ended up being charged with the death and by the death penalty. Um, but what's interesting is he was interrogated all night without an attorney until he admitted to the killings, and he later denied it before he died. He denied that he killed her. And it came
Mm.
out that he was also mentally challenged. So that wasn't taken into account either, on top of you can't just interrogate suspects without an attorney present, some kind of legal counsel needs to be present. Like that, you would not get away with that kind of stuff now.
Mm-mm.
And the way that they interrogated him and got a confession out of him could be thrown out as well in today's society, in today's courts. Excuse me.
Mm-hmm.
Um. So, what do you think? Do you think there were two killers and Cochran was actually one of them, or do you think he was innocent and killed for a crime that he did not commit?
I, I mean, personally, if I was on my deathbed about to take a fall for something I didn't do, I would still say I didn't do it because it'd be the truth. So, I
Yeah.
mean, unless he was like kind of, I guess, unless his, unless him himself was kind of, they found other things that might have thought that he would do it, have done that, then absolutely he was probably innocent. Because did they find the pencil punctures on this girl or no?
I didn't
Did
see
it say?
anything there. No, I didn't
Yeah.
see anything about that. So I'm
Okay.
not sure. I'm not sure if
Because
they did or not because it was
I
4 years
mean,
earlier.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Like maybe it was just maybe it's the same person. I don't know. I mean, because if you're saying 4 years ago this girl same thing happened to this girl, and then this girl pops up and same thing happens to her. It's kind. I mean, it kind of was it in the same area?
Yeah, that's what I had
Yeah.
mentioned. It
Okay.
was two
Yeah.
blocks from their home.
Yeah. So yeah, it's got to be the same killer, and I don't think it was him. I don't think it because they didn't even did they even question him about the murder that was 4 years ago or no?
Well, no, that's what so the murder he was charged for was Mary Lou Jenkins, and
Was
he
just
was,
her. Okay.
yeah, it was just her, and then he was placed in prison, and then he died. So there was like no chance that he was out 4 years later. Like they picked him up really quickly after the crime was done. It was said that they questioned all, or not all, but a lot of African American gentlemen and stuff, which we know that back then they jumped at
Yeah.
that. Like they,
Exactly. I
it
mean, they
had
still.
to be them, you
Yeah.
know, which is ridiculous, but that's kind of how it was back then. It was terrible, and they did not provide them any kind of counsel when it was needed. I mean, he ended up with counsel for like court and everything,
Yeah.
but um, they
But
didn't
not during
care.
the interrogation.
Yeah, they didn't
Yeah.
care
No,
about
I
them.
don't. I don't think he did it. I don't know. I don't think he did it.
Yeah, I
There's.
don't know for.
Yeah. I don't either.
But I honestly believe whoever killed these women got away because they ended up reopening or opening a private investigation in 1953 due to the similarities in the cases and due to the assaults on women that happened prior to the Jenkins murder. So Mary Lou Jenkins in 1906 and then after her. So there were cases of assaults on women, rapes on women that happened before her and then of course after her. And the reason they really opened it back up was because of Janet Christman's murder and the similarities to that. So they reopened it to re-examine it, but by then it was too late for Floyd Cochran. Like it was,
Mm.
it's a little too late. But they were trying to figure out who really was the killer, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, the cases are just too similar to believe these women weren't killed by the same person. But I don't know if there is a link between Robert Mueller and Mary Lou Jenkins, other than they lived in the same area, and that her house was close to the Romax house. But the evidence that was in Janet Christman's case seems more than damning. I mean, it just astonishes me that this man got away with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I mean, they had to have taken some DNA. I mean, I guess back then, I don't know. I guess different era, but in this time of day, if that would have happened, if that, I mean, that does happen, and they do get DNA, and they do. If you've been in the system or been any type of trouble with the law, your DNA is in the system for good. Like it's not coming out. You can't change your DNA. So
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know. I guess different era. That's. I mean, I feel like if they had the stuff we had now, they would have been able to find it out. They'd
Yeah.
be able to figure it out.
But I mean, even with that, even today, police cooperation or people messing with tampering with evidence or doing something not by the book gets in the way. So it's not like
Mhm.
that's not something that can't happen today. I mean, it
Yeah.
definitely can, and it
Yeah.
can miss
You're right.
the entire case for it. So I don't know, but it just seems too eerie and too
Yeah, it does.
similar. But so yeah, that's the story that ignited the horror movies where the killer stalked and sometimes killed a babysitter. And that's what
Hmm.
started the When a Stranger Calls and movies like Halloween. I'm sure there's other ones out there, but those were the most prominent ones that I knew about.
Yeah. I think those are the ones that I know about. But honestly, I didn't even realize that they came from a murder story. I thought it was just somebody made all that up.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah, I mean, people are creative like that, but sometimes these stories do come from some kind of horrific um, crime. A lot of times that's how they get some of these stories and run with them is, and it's not like it was similar, like there was no tracing of the call, there was no, she wasn't able to actually speak to the police. I'm not sure if there was calls made to the house that night, but there are definitely a lot of changes. They just try to make it more scary for the audience, obviously.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. That's awesome though. I mean, it's not awesome, but it's cool. And it's because I've never heard. Actually, this is the first time I've heard about a babysitter story. So it kind of is awesome to see and hear other stories that that turn into make movies. What
Yeah,
movies are?
I had heard something about it before, but never in depth like this until I researched it.
Yeah, because like when I think of when you first said babysitter story, I was like, okay, is it like this babysitter's but like the haunting on Netflix, the haunting of Bly Manor? I don't know if you've watched that, but it's pretty much this uncle pretty much puts out a job ad, and spoiler alert, just warning, spoiler alert if you haven't watched it, but um, it's like he's getting somebody to come take care of the two children, and she's starting to find like all these other things that's happening on the grounds, and I'm just like, that's what I thought it was going to be, but it actually turned into something awesome. So I'm glad you
Yeah.
told it.
Well, thanks. I'm glad I did too. It was very interesting to research. It's sad what happened. I mean, there were not only was it the murder of Mary Lou Jenkins and Janet Christman that was sad, but the possibility that Floyd Cochran didn't even commit the murder just kind of makes it a little bit sadder. There are other
Hmm.
stories out about him as well, but it wasn't, I didn't think it had anything to do with this story, so I didn't put that in here. But
Cool. uh,
um,
and that will tie up, I guess, episode one, or episode two, excuse me, episode two. One
technically, this will
was,
be episode 2 because the intro was 1.
yeah. So that's awesome. Uh, do you have any next? Can you give us a tidbit about what's going to be next you're working on, or because I know
Well,
mine's going to be the Hitchhiker of Highway 281. So
yeah, and
when
yours
that's,
will be the very next one we do. And then I'll follow you. So I'm looking into the Ouija board and the
mm,
history of that and some stories on that, which I've never researched either. So I've got some really cool facts about that too.
yeah, yeah, because we were always told not to touch it. So I'm
Yeah.
excited to hear about that. Awesome. So do you want to do our social? You want to shout out our social media stuff, or?
Yeah, I can do that. So be sure to tune in next week or next Friday for another scary story. And don't forget to find us at Twitter, and that's at Moonlight Scary because we couldn't fit the whole thing on there. And then on Instagram, we're Moonlit Scary Stories. Um, we could actually fit the whole thing on there. We'll be on Spotify first, and then it should go out to all the other podcast apps. Um, you can leave us a review, email us, or message us on Twitter or Instagram. You can email us at moonlitscarystories@gmail.com. We love constructive criticism, and we'd love to hear your thoughts. And that's it, guys. That's our podcast for the day.
Awesome. Talk to you guys later.